Good morning. Is it on?
Morning.
Ooh. Uh-oh. Good morning. Your partner today, and I would like to welcome all of you to Westminster. Or you can pick up a copy from the table in the back. The chalice is a symbol of our faith, and our chalice lighting marks the beginning of our worship service. I will light mine and share our reading. Then if you are online, I invite you to light yours if you have one. And if you like, you can use the chat to post the name of the street where that chalice was lit. We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, and welcoming of multiple truths.
It's good to see you all here in person. I can't see you online because we had a little tech issue this morning with the network, but I'm really glad we are all together here this morning. My name is Ellen Quaadgras. I'm the minister here, and it's good to be here. I want to mention that due to the still high numbers of COVID in our area, the bridge team has asked our worship speakers to wear a mask even while speaking. So just so you know, that's what we'll be doing for the time being. And our theme this month is widening the circle. In today's service, we will hear from those who have been historically on the margins. We'll hear their stories, their experience, their viewpoints, an opportunity to widen the circle for all of us. Let us deepen into worship with these words by Reverend Michelle LaGrave. We gather together. We arrive as individuals, as couples, as families, as neighbors, as friends. We got here by Zooming, by walking, by riding, by driving, by connecting. We bring with us our joys and our sorrows, our laughter and our tears, our worries and our fears, our questions and our beliefs, our ethics and our values. We're sitting in chairs, stretching in aisles, if there are, if you could call them aisles, relaxing in recliners. We members, friends, and visitors come from many paths and join together as one congregation to lift up our highest ideals. We have gathered. Now let us worship. And we'll begin worshiping with our opening hymn, which again, due to some tech problems, will change a little bit. Nonetta and I are going to sing it instead of having it on the TV, which we just found out about 15 minutes ago. So bear with us and hum loudly if you're here in person, and sing loudly if you are at home. All right, our opening hymn, if you want to rise to feel the energy of this morning, and here we go. It's gathered here, the mystery of the hour.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near.
remain standing or remain seated if you're at home, if you're not standing, as we say together our unison affirmation, which is found in your order of service or in the chat. The spirit of this church and service our mission. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please be seated.
Okay, good morning. My name is Camila Bajakovsky, and I am a pastoral care associate here at Westminster, along with Sue Bolins and Andy DeLong. While Reverend Ellen is available for pastoral counseling, we are available to listen and support to anyone who needs a listening ear. Our contact information is in the chat and in the order of service. So as we gather in community, we carry life's hurts and its great joys, recognizing that joys shared are multiplied and hurts shared can be lightened. We invite you to share your joys and sorrows in the chat.
Closer to our theme for today of widening the circle. There is a movement within Unitarian Universalism called the promise and the practice. It's about this time as a turning moment, about making a choice to listen deeply to the stories in our movement that have not been heard and taken to heart by all Unitarian Universalists. It is a lamenting of what our Unitarian Universalist tradition and congregations have lost by the ways in which we've been unwilling or unable to center people of color. And it is a celebration of our shared commitment to live into a new chapter of the story of our UU faith. Today's prayer is based on the principles of this promise and practice movement. Let us open our hearts and still our minds, entering a time of prayer and meditation. Let us call forth and hold in our hearts the stories of all who have come before us, the memories of those who are with us today, and our hope for tomorrow, for all of those who will come after us. May we be thankful for this opportunity for healing and forgiveness and reconciliation, while knowing that we can never and should never forget all that brings us here today. Let us be glad that voice has not only been given to those whose sorrow were companions to this faith, but that the stories told by voices, these voices are received with a goal of redemption and understanding. Let us call upon that light which shines in each of us to give us strength and walk together into the future and do the work that's necessary, which does not end today. Let us have the wisdom to lovingly have whatever conversations we need to have with each other, that we must have with each other to grow this faith in radical love and inclusion. May it be so. Amen. For our song and response, I invite you to remain seated. You may hum along if you like, if you're here in person. You may sing along if you like, if you are at home. And Nonetta and I will sing the song. There is more love somewhere.
I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere.
Our February Share the Plate recipient is the College Crusade. The College Crusade prepares and inspires young people in Rhode Island to become the first in their families to attend and complete college. College Crusade helps students from middle school all the way through to post-secondary education via an engaging and diverse staff representative of the communities that they serve. The goals are to address barriers to education and economic empowerment for their students. The other half of the offering goes to support all the other good work of this community. You can donate using the link that is now being put in the chat. If you are here in person, we ask that you use your cell phone to click on the donate button on the Westminster website, or you can leave your offering in the box on the table after the service. The offering will now be given and received with gratitude. Our reading today is adapted from the Soul Matters theme article for February. Is it possible that being on the inside leaves you out of the loop? What if that space of exclusion is also a position of perspective? What if being shut out allows you to understand the insiders better than they understand themselves? What if who we are doesn't end at the barriers of our own skin? What if sin is believing that you can put the puzzle together with only the pieces that belong to you? What if heaven is the moment you realize that none of us can get there alone? What if the only true freedom lies in the willingness to fight against that which imprisons someone else? And what if all these questions are a matter of life and death? Or is it a matter of dying to live? If that is true, Then let's widen the circle until it breaks. For as long as the circle exists, pieces and parts of ourselves will always lie on the other side of the line. So let's push, pull, twist and tear, dig underneath and climb over the top. Do whatever it takes to meet each other face to face. And having found each other, let us stare and struggle, fight and forgive, call in and call out until me and you dissolves into us. Is there any other way we can become whole?
At a moth event a few years ago, Phelan Johnson shared a story about Graham Greene, a First Nations actor who was in a bunch of blockbuster movies like Dances with Wolves and Die Hard 3, and he was in Thunderheart. Graham has this story about one of his acting gigs, one of his first acting gigs in Toronto. He's cast in a play, and in this play, Graham has to enter from outside the theater. He has to enter from an alleyway. And so one night, he's getting ready to make his entrance, and he's listening for his cue line when a cop cruiser goes by and sees him standing there. Now, the cops assume he's just some First Nations guy loitering in the alley, and they say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he says, "I'm in this play waiting for my cue." And the cops say, "Yeah, right, buddy, don't go anywhere." But at that moment, Graham hears his cue line and he runs onto the stage, pursued by the two police who at that moment realized that he was in fact in a play. And now, so were they. Phelan tells that story as part of a larger narrative about racism and assumptions and invisibility, particularly invisibility. Those of us who are white are not only unlikely to experience something like that, we are also a lot less likely to see it or register it when it happens to someone else. White people are regrettably but overwhelmingly sheltered from the realities that people of color face every day, all the time. I've heard it compared to being behind a two-way mirror. People of color can see white people and their experiences, but because of the way racism works, white people just see mostly reflections of ourselves looking back. And so in order to make the truths of people of color more visible, in order to widen that circle and bring in some fresh air, in order to begin to balance out centuries-long centering of white voices today, I want to center perspectives and experiences of people of color. A window into experiences that reveal the sometimes subtle, sometimes blatant workings of racism in our society. Like this story from Isabel Wilkerson, whose book Cast I referenced back in January. In that book, she also shares an experience which she called both tragic and completely mundane. It happened years before Isabel became a best-selling author, back when she was working as a national correspondent for the New York Times. She was doing a routine piece on retailers in Chicago. She arrived a few minutes early to her last interview and was waiting in the nearly empty boutique for the manager. When a man wearing a business suit and overcoat walked in, harried and breathless, his assistant nodded that this is the man, so Isabel went up to introduce herself. He was out of breath, rushing, checking his watch. "Oh, I can't talk with you now," he said, brushing past Isabel. "I'm very, very busy. I'm running late for an appointment." Isabel was confused at first. Might he have made another appointment for the exact same time? Why would he schedule 2 appointments at once? And she saw no one else in the boutique except the 2 of them and his assistant. "I think I'm your appointment," she said to him. "No, this is a very important appointment with the New York Times," he said, pulling off his coat. "I can't talk with you now. I'll have to talk with you some other time." "But I am with the New York Times," she told him, pen and notebook in hand. "I talked with you on the phone. I'm the one who made the appointment with you for 4:30. "What's the name?" "Isabel Wilkerson with the New York Times." "How do I know that?" he shot back, growing impatient. "Look, I don't have time to talk to you right now. She'll be here any minute." He looked to the front entrance and then again at his watch. He let out a sigh. "What kind of ID do you have? Do you have a business card?" Isabel had unfortunately handed them all out by the time she got to him. "I've been interviewing all day," she told him. "I happen to be out of them now." "What about ID? Do you have a license on you?" "I shouldn't have to show you my license, but here it is." He gave it a cursory look. "You don't have anything with the New York Times on it?" "Would I be here if I weren't here to interview you? All this time has passed. We've been standing here. No one else has shown up." "She must be running late. I'm going to have to ask you to leave so I can get ready for my appointment." Isabel writes that she left and walked back to the Times Bureau, dazed and incensed, trying to figure out what had just happened. This man had been so blinded that he dismissed the idea that the reporter he was anxiously awaiting and excited to talk to was standing right in front of him. It seemed not to occur to him that a New York Times national correspondent could come in a container such as Isabel, despite every indication that the reporter he so wanted to talk to was she. That kind of blindness may be shocking, but it's not as exceptional or removed from people like me as I might like to believe. There's a recently released book called Centering, which details the experiences of religious professionals of color in our own UU association and of ways in which our mostly white congregations don't always see things, don't always get it. In fact, often don't get it. It's a good book, and I encourage you to read it. While this next story is not from that book, it is from a religious professional of color in our denomination. And when I first heard him tell it, it made a big impression on me. It's from musician Dr. Glenn Thomas Rideout, highly popular and acclaimed music director and leader in his own congregation and at national gatherings. This story isn't about an experience that happened just after a rendition of the song, There Is More Love Somewhere, that Nonetta and I sang a few moments ago, which is an African-American hymn from the time of slavery. It is a hymn of lament and aspiration. Here's his story. Last summer at General Assembly, I walked out of the sanctuary we had made from the convention center space. As tired as I was, I returned more and more to my deeply introverted default of self, he said, when I passed a woman who had to stop to talk with me. Many religious professionals who have led a morning worship service know this is where the work begins. She walked up to me and said, "Dr. Rideout." Because she had enough grace to remind me of my title, he said, she gave me the opportunity to resume my church face and posture. She held my hands as if we had known each other for the longest time. She looked into my eyes and she said, "You know what? I always sing that song. There is more love right here. There is more love right here. I'm gonna keep on because I found it. There is more love right here." I don't understand, she said, why it is we don't sing it that way here at General Assembly. We've already found a community of love. And because she had enough compassion and grace to call me Dr. Rideout, he continues, she had given me enough time and opportunity to summon up a bit of stillness from the weary remnants of my churchman's posture. She had looked into my eyes and spoke and sang to me with her own truth. She had asked with genuine curiosity why it is we don't all sing the words that she had come to know and love. I was compelled to respond to this woman I had just met with, "Thank you for trusting me with that question." And then I explained to her why I thought it was necessary, particularly with the music of people of color, that we enter and examine these songs with more curiosity than colonization. I thanked her and I explained that for those of us who live with the privilege of knowing love, it can be difficult to understand the perspective of one who lives without such privilege. I explained that it can be difficult to understand the lived experience of those who have trouble finding evidence of love in their immediate vicinity, in their church, in their neighborhood, in their city, in their nation, even in their planet. I thanked her and I explained that for some who don't share the privilege of perceiving love, quote, right there, right here, moving toward that idea of privilege had become a vital practice of Black faith. And I offered that if we, as a spiritual community of Unitarian Universalists populated by well-meaning people, are to mean anything to the lives and the deaths of people of color, we must begin by learning, not squelching, the forms of expression that arise from these living perspectives. And she said, "Thank you. I've never heard it expressed that way. I've never understood it that way. And I will never sing it that same way again." When we inhabit the music and forms of expression of people who lived their lives along the margin of notice, he concludes, we must notice that we have entered holy ground, a sacred space of learning, a sacred place of relationship. For the last story, I want to go back to the beginning, to Phelan Johnson, the woman who relayed that incident I first shared about Graham Greene, the actor. In her Moth performance, she goes on to share that she herself, like Graham Greene, is First Nations, but happens to look white and is often mistaken for white, which often leaves her feeling invisible herself. Also, like Graham Greene, she is an actor, an aspiring actor. And she was at one time offered a gig leading a tour that would go through a part of the city of Toronto that, as she put it, is kind of rough. There's a large homeless population there, and a lot of people who live there are also First Nations. And for her, as she put it, with her pink skin, to be leading a tour through this part of town felt a little uncomfortable. And yet, she also realized it would be a chance for her to address some of this stuff in herself. It would be a chance to raise awareness in others. And she could tell that Graham Greene story, which she loved and which happened right near there. So she put a tour together and decided to call it Invisible Toronto. In it, she would talk about racism in the city, about wooden Indians and Halloween costumes and sports teams mascots, and how racism has become so embedded in our culture that we don't see it anymore. She would talk about the Indigenous history of the city. She would talk about the drop-in center that offers services and lockers for some of the homeless population. And as a woman with a great sense of humor, she would, as she said, talk about colonization and genocide in a really entertaining way. And then at the end, she would get to tell that Graham Greene story. So one day, she's on the second to last tour of the series, and she sees the usual suspects there with her as the group. There's the sweet grandmothers with sun hats and tote bags with cats on them, and there's the artistic types and the theater types, and there's always one person, she said, who fancies themselves a historian and who's there to make sure she's getting everything right. So they start on the tour, and it's going really well until about the midpoint, where a really drunk, really rowdy, really bloody guy decides to join them. She finds herself struggling with that because she can see it's making people kind of uncomfortable, and he's making her kind of uncomfortable, but her whole thesis of this tour is making the invisible visible, to make people have to see this kind of thing. So she's like, okay, what do I do here? So she hands him a little flyer that explains what the tour is, and he takes it and he seems to like it. So he comes along. And they go for a bit and they get to the Graham Greene stop, and he finds that really, really funny. So funny, he's laughing louder and longer than anyone else on the tour. And then they go by the homeless drop-in center where she talks about the services they offer, and he screams, lockers, lockers, lockers. And she realizes he probably has a locker there. So they keep going, and finally they get to the question and answer stop, and he shoots up his hand in the air and he says, hey, so my people are Spanish and we did a lot of terrible things to your people. What do I do about that? And Phelan is rendered speechless, she said, because it is exactly the kind of thing she wanted people to take away from this experience. This is the question she wanted people to ask her. She just didn't think it would come from someone like him. And she's also a little bit speechless, she said, because the entire time she thought this guy was First Nations, and that's a little uncomfortable for her too, she said. And so once she got her words back, she said, well, by doing things like this, by coming on tours like this, and by questioning history, and by asking beautiful, simple questions like the one that you just asked me. He nodded, and he seemed satisfied with my answer, she said. So that's the end of the tour, and they start walking back to the starting point, and suddenly she sees someone coming toward them, and he's coming pretty quickly, and he's buff, and he is shirtless, and he is First Nations. She is sure of it this time. And he walks directly up to their bloody Spanish friend, and he says, hey, you touch my hair again, and I'm gonna kick your, like I did yesterday. And the Spanish man shrinks, he becomes so tiny, and it is heartbreaking to witness, she says. I know I have to do something, she goes on, because number one, I'm in charge. And number two, I feel like I owe this guy something now. So I slide in between the two men, and I look up at the really buff, shirtless First Nations guy, and I say, hey man, you don't want to do this. And I brace myself. And then the craziest thing happens. I hear, leave him alone, and get out of here, and don't you touch him. And I look over and I see the tour group of young grandmothers with cat tote bags, and skeptical white guys and theater crowd, and they're all yelling at this First Nations guy to leave our bloody Spanish friend alone. And I'm shocked, she says, and the Spanish guy is shocked, but by far the most shocked person is this First Nations guy, because somehow in 24 hours, this Spanish man that he kicked out of last night had somehow gathered a crew, and we love theater, and we will take him out. The story ends without violence. The First Nation guy retreats. The tour group makes it back to the start without further incident, and Phelan is left with quite a story to tell. A story to help make the invisible visible. A story about seeing what is too often unseen. About regular people learning some things and experiencing some things and seeing humanity and complexity that is usually far too hidden. 4 stories to help make the invisible visible for us, to widen our circle, and for white people like me to begin again and again to take off the blinders racism has put on us, and for all of us to do whatever we can to take the next step toward a world where all are seen and honored and respected for exactly who they are. Let us sing together our closing hymn, One More Step. You can rise in body or in spirit and hum along as Nonetta and I sing.
One more step, we will take one more step till there is peace across, and everyone will take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word, one more pray. We will say one more pray till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer.
Please remain standing for our closing words. What if who we are doesn't end at the barriers of our own skin? What if heaven is the moment you realize none of us can get there alone? What if, as long as a circle exists, pieces and parts of ourselves will always be outside the line? So, let us widen that circle until it breaks. Let us push, pull, dig underneath, climb over the top, do whatever it takes to meet each other face to face. And having found each other, let us stare and struggle and fight and forgive, call in and call out until me and you dissolves into us. May we all become more whole. Amen.